I wasn't supposed to be home that morning. My flight had landed early, the roads were empty, and for once, life felt quiet enough for me to breathe. I remember rolling into my driveway with that strange mix of exhaustion and peace, the kind you only feel after being gone for too long. But the second I stepped out of my truck, something felt wrong. My house looked normal. The porch light still flickered the same way it always did. But my garage was humming. Not the loud kind of noise you can point at, just a faint vibration like someone breathing on the other side of the door. And the smell hit me even before the fear did. Perfume. Not mine. Not anyone I knew. Sweet, floral, and fresh. The kind of scent someone wears when they want attention. The kind of scent that shouldn't be coming from inside a locked garage on private property. I walked toward it slowly, listening, feeling the air shift as I got closer. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a leftover smell, maybe a neighbor's scent carried by the wind. But when I placed my hand on the metal handle, it was warm. Someone had been inside recently. Or worse, someone was still inside. My heart started beating faster. This wasn't just trespassing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This felt deliberate. Someone had entered my home, my space, my garage. And as crazy as it sounded, the only person bold enough, arrogant enough, to pull something like this was a woman from the HOA who already acted like she owned half the neighborhood. People called her Karen behind her back, and sometimes to her face. She loved rules, power, and showing up where she didn't belong. But even she wouldn't cross a line like this. Right? I lifted the garage door slowly, expecting maybe a raccoon, maybe a broken light, maybe a prank. I wasn't prepared for what I actually saw. She was sitting inside my car. Not outside it. Not near it. Inside it like it belonged to her. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. Her head tilted back like she'd been waiting. Her eyes weren't surprised to see me. In fact, she looked bored. Annoyed. As if I was the one intruding on her space. And for a moment I couldn't move. Everything inside me froze. The anger, the confusion, the disbelief. She smiled like she'd planned this moment. Like she'd rehearsed it. Finally, she said softly, "You're home." The worst part wasn't that she was there. It was the calmness, the confidence, the way she said it like she somehow had a right to be sitting behind my wheel in my locked garage on my private land. I stepped back before I even realized what I was doing. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the scene in front of me. Why was she here? How did she get in? Why did she look so comfortable? And what did she mean by finally? My instincts were screaming, telling me something wasn't right. That this wasn't just another HOA complaint or neighborhood argument. This was personal, calculated, maybe even dangerous. And before she could say another word, before she could explain whatever twisted reason she had, I did the one thing she didn't expect. I closed the garage door from the outside, locked it, turned away, and then, without telling a soul where I was going, I vanished for 5 days. But the real mystery didn't begin when I left. It began with what she left behind. Something I didn't discover until I came back. And when I did, everything changed. When I first walked away from that garage, locked, silent, and holding a woman who shouldn't have been there, I expected panic to set in. Instead, something colder moved through me. Something steadier. It was the same feeling I used to get years ago before everything changed. Back when I worked long shifts as a night guard at a storage facility. Back then, I learned to trust my instincts, to listen to my gut when something felt off. And every line of my body that morning told me one thing. I was in danger, and I needed space to think. 5 days. I didn't plan that number. I just drove. It wasn't until the second day that the reality of her being there, inside my car, in my locked garage, really hit me. Karen wasn't just any HOA member. She was the type who found comfort in control. People said she memorized the bylaws like scripture, that she'd knock on doors at dawn if she saw a trash bin 1 inch out of place. But the rumors went deeper. Some said she once entered a neighbor's backyard to measure a fence without permission. Others claimed she had a spare key to every utility box on our street, because she insisted on doing inspections. I always kept my distance. But she didn't. Ever since I moved into that neighborhood 2 years ago, she treated me differently. I wasn't sure if she saw me as a challenge, a threat, or just another project she needed to fix. She'd show up randomly, pretending to check the mailbox cluster, pretending to admire the landscaping. But her eyes were always searching, scanning, judging. I thought I imagined it at first, but my friends noticed too. She watched me more closely than anyone else. Maybe that's why finding her in my car didn't feel like a random moment. It felt like the final step in something she'd been building. As I drove farther away from home, the questions kept repeating in my head. How did she get into my garage? What was she waiting for? And what did she want to say before I closed the door on her? By the third day, I pulled into a small roadside cabin miles away from town. The place smelled like old pine and cigarette smoke, but it was quiet enough to think. I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone buzzing with notifications I ignored. Missed HOA calls. A message from a neighbor asking if everything was okay. Another from someone claiming they saw activity outside my house. I didn't reply, not yet, because the truth was, those 5 days weren't just about getting away from her. They were about stepping back into a part of myself that I'd avoided for years. After losing my brother in a break-in years ago, a night where the police never figured out who forced their way into his apartment, I developed a habit. I watched everything. I documented everything. I locked everything twice. The smallest changes in my environment could send my mind spiraling, and therapy only took me halfway out of that place. Karen showing up inside my garage with that eerie confidence wasn't just a violation of privacy. It triggered something old, something I thought I'd buried. Every sound in that cabin echoed too loudly. Every shadow felt like it had a reason for being there. And every mile between me and my house made me more certain that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was connected to something deeper, something planned. On the fourth day, I finally turned my phone back on. My neighbor, Mark, had sent a voice note. His tone was shaky, almost whispering. "Man, you need to call me. Something weird is going on at your place. People have been stopping by. Someone tried opening your backyard gate last night. And Karen, she's been asking questions about when you're coming back." My chest tightened. She knew I was gone. But how? That night I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the cabin walls creaking, every creak sounding like footsteps. And I kept thinking about her face. Calm, unreadable, almost relieved when I opened that garage door, as if she'd been waiting not just for me, but for that exact moment. What was she planning? What was she hiding? And what had she left behind in my garage? The fifth morning, before the sun even rose, I made my decision. I packed my things, started the engine, and headed home. Not because I thought I was ready, but because whatever this was, it wasn't going to wait. I just didn't expect what I'd find when I finally walked back into that garage. Because the real story didn't start with her sitting in my car. It started with what she left behind, something I should have been afraid to touch. When I pulled into my driveway after 5 days on the road, the house didn't greet me the way it usually did. Felt different. Still. Too still. Like the place had been holding its breath, waiting for me to return. Even the trees along the fence line seemed rigid, frozen in place. I sat inside my truck for a long moment, hands tight on the steering wheel, staring at the closed garage door. The same door I'd locked with her still inside. My pulse picked up. Was she gone? Was she waiting? Had someone else come? I stepped out slowly, scanning the yard. Nothing moved. No cars. No neighbors peeking through blinds. Just silence. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. I walked toward the garage, my keys cold in my hand. Every step felt like it could set something off. And underneath that fear, something darker was growing: curiosity. A part of me needed to know what she'd been doing. Needed answers. That part of me, my flaw, was always stronger than my caution. The lock clicked open. For a moment, all I heard was the metallic echo bouncing inside the empty space. I lifted the door. The garage was empty. No Karen. No signs of a struggle. No scent of perfume. Just emptiness. But emptiness can lie. And it was lying now. Something had changed. My car seat was pushed all the way back, as if someone tall had been sitting there. A small smudge, a fingerprint maybe, rested on the inside of the windshield. A faint scratch sat near the glove compartment. None of it was mine. That was when I saw it. A small, folded piece of paper placed perfectly on the driver's seat. Like an invitation. Or a warning. My hands shook as I unfolded it. 3 words. Written in neat, careful handwriting. We need talk. Not we need to talk. Not signed. Just those words, like she wanted to skip grammar and go straight to fear. I stood there, trying to steady my breathing. But before I could even begin to process the message, the sound of crunching gravel behind me made me jerk around. Mark, the neighbor who'd left me that shaky voice note, stood at the end of my driveway. He looked exhausted, pale, and worried. You shouldn't be back alone, he said, glancing nervously toward the house. A cold weight settled in my stomach. What happened? He hesitated, lowering his voice. People have been coming around late at night. Not just Karen. Men. Unfamiliar faces. They parked outside, walked around your place, checked windows. I called the HOA, but they said they didn't know anything about it. That's a lie. Karen's been meeting with people. I saw her. I felt my jaw clench. Who were they? Mark shook his head. I don't know. But they weren't neighbors. This wasn't just a weird HOA incident anymore. This was bigger. I looked back at the note. The handwriting was too careful, almost practiced. Something about it felt wrong. Like she wanted me to see it, but not for the reason she claimed. Mark took a step closer. There's something else. Karen. She's been watching you for months. I didn't say anything because I thought it was just her being nosy. But she asked questions about your schedule, your job, who visits your house. A knot formed in my chest. What exactly did she ask? I whispered. He swallowed. She wanted to know when you'd be gone, and for how long. A cold rush of anger and fear ran through me. So she knew before I left. Maybe she even planned it. But why? Before I could press him further, another complication arose. A subplot I didn't expect. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. You came back too soon. My throat tightened. That wasn't Karen's style of writing. This was someone else. A second message came seconds later. Check the attic. The attic. The one place I rarely entered. The one place I knew was locked before I left. I felt torn, 2 choices pulling in opposite directions. Call the police and risk revealing something I wasn't ready to explain. Or go inside and face whatever waited for me. My flaw won again. Curiosity twisted with dread. And as I crossed the threshold into the house, Mark grabbed my arm. Don't go in there alone, he warned. But I did. Because some answers can't wait. The problem was, I didn't know that the moment I stepped into the house, the real trap had already been triggered. The house felt wrong the moment I walked inside. Colder. Quieter. Like someone had been here long enough to leave their presence behind, but not long enough to leave a trace. I closed the door slowly, listening for anything. Breathing, footsteps, a shift in the air. Nothing. The silence was so heavy it felt like it was pressing against my ears. I glanced back at Mark through the window. He waited by the driveway, tense, chewing on his lip. He mouthed something, be careful, but I'd already crossed a line. I locked the door. Then I looked up. The attic entrance was a small square in the hallway ceiling. Harmless. Ordinary. But tonight, it looked like a mouth. Quiet, open, waiting. The unknown text had said, check the attic. My steps toward it felt slow, almost slippery, like part of me wanted to turn back but another part kept pushing forward. My pulse hammered in my ears. Every floorboard creaked too loudly. Every shadow leaned too close. When I reached the rope dangling from the attic door, my fingers hesitated. What if Karen was up there? What if someone else was? What if I just walked back into the exact trap they'd set? I pulled. The attic door dropped open with a low groan. A thin cloud of dust fell like old memories. The ladder slid down. My breath caught in my throat. No movement above. No sounds. Just stillness. I climbed one step, then another. The wood shook under my weight. Halfway up, my phone buzzed again. I froze. Another text. Don't trust him. Him? Mark? Someone else? Whoever was sending the messages wasn't guessing. They knew exactly what was happening. Exactly when I'd be reading it. I climbed the last steps and poked my head into the attic. It was pitch black except for a thin line of light from a cracked vent. Boxes were stacked in uneven towers. Old tools hung from nails. And in the far corner, something glinted. A small metal lockbox. One I'd never seen before. My heart pounded as I crawled toward it, each movement stirring up dust and cold air. The box wasn't dusty. It wasn't old. It had been placed there recently. I touched it. Warm. Someone had held it not long ago. As I reached for the latch, a sudden thud below made me jump. Footsteps. Heavy, fast footsteps. Someone had entered the house. My breath caught. Mark was still outside. So who? The floor creaked again. Then a voice floated up the hallway. Low, calm, female. I know you're home, Karen. My blood turned to ice. Why was she inside? How did she get in? I stayed frozen, crouched near the lockbox, barely breathing. She walked slowly through the house, each step echoing beneath me. Her tone was strange, soft, almost comforting. You left without letting me finish. A pause. And you weren't supposed to come back yet. My throat tightened. She knew I'd left early. She knew I would return eventually. But how? The footsteps stopped directly under the attic. She was right below me. I left you something, she said quietly. You found it, didn't you? The note, the lockbox, the messages, were they her? Or someone warning me about her? I didn't move. She exhaled slowly, like she could feel me hiding above her. You think I'm the problem, but I'm not the only one watching you. A cold shiver ran down my back. Not the only one. Before I could process her words, another sound cut through the tension. A second set of footsteps, this time from outside. Mark's voice yelled from the porch, panicked and sharp. Get away from the house. Karen didn't react, didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered, too late, and then bang. Mark slammed against the door. Open up. She's not alone. Someone's with her. My heart dropped. Another voice, deep, unfamiliar, growled from somewhere inside the house. Attic. He's up there. I clutched the lockbox without thinking. Below me, Karen's voice softened, almost sympathetic. You shouldn't have come home yet. The attic ladder suddenly jerked. Someone was climbing. I scrambled backward into the darkness, clutching the warm metal box, breath shaking, heart racing, as a shadow rose into the attic behind me. Not Karen. Someone bigger. Someone I'd never seen before. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Karen hadn't been hiding from me. She'd been hiding me from someone else. The ladder creaked again. A hand appeared on the top rung, and the attic light finally flickered on. The man's hand gripping the attic ladder was thick, scarred, and unfamiliar. His fingers curled around the wood with slow, deliberate strength, like he wasn't in a hurry, because he already knew he had me trapped. For a split second, all I could hear was my own breathing. Fast, uneven, and underneath it, Karen's voice drifting up from the hallway, oddly calm, as if everything happening was unfolding exactly the way she expected. You need to listen now, she called up softly. Before he gets to you. The man climbed another rung. His boots thudded against the ladder, steady and controlled. He wasn't rushing. He was confident. That terrified me more than anything. I shuffled backward in the attic, clutching the warm metal lockbox against my chest. The darkness around me thickened, boxes stacking into crooked shadows. The single vent light cast narrow slashes across the old insulation. Every direction felt like a dead end. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Do not let him open the box. My blood went cold. Not don't open the box. Not don't trust him. But don't let him open it. Which meant whoever was texting me knew he was here, knew he was coming, knew he wanted the lockbox, and somehow knew what was inside it. The man's head rose into view. His face came into the dim light. He wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't HOA. He was built like a hired enforcer, broad shoulders, shaved head, jaw clenched tight. His eyes locked onto mine, flat and unblinking. "Hand it over," he said quietly. My throat closed. "What is this? Who are you?" He didn't answer. His gaze shifted to the lockbox in my hands. Hungry, focused, like everything else in the world was irrelevant. "Last chance," he muttered. "Give it to me." Below him, Karen suddenly shouted, fear finally cracking her voice. "Don't let him take it. It's not his." That one sentence changed everything. Not his? The man climbed faster now, reaching. I scrambled back until my shoulders hit the far wall. Then bang. The front door slammed open downstairs. Mark's voice exploded through the house. "Get away from him!" Crosscut. Chaos. Footsteps colliding. Voices shouting. Something heavy crashing against a wall. The man in the attic snarled, losing his focus for half a second as he glanced down. That was all I needed. I kicked the nearest box at him. Hard. It smashed into his face, knocking him off the top rung. He stumbled but didn't fall. His grip was iron. He pulled himself back up with a violent grunt. 2 more inches and he'd be inside. My survival instinct took over. I stood, raised the metal lockbox high, and smashed it against the attic beam as hard as I could. The metal cracked. Something inside rattled loudly, too loudly, like metal hitting metal. The man froze. His expression changed, not anger, not pain, but fear. Karen screamed from below, "Stop! Don't break it!" Too late. The lockbox slipped from my hands, skidding across the attic floor and spilling onto its side. The latch snapped open. A small flash drive slid out, wrapped in a sheet of paper covered in neat handwriting, the same handwriting as the note in my car. The man lunged. I grabbed the flash drive first and shoved it into my pocket. He didn't care about me. He didn't care about the box. He cared about that. Before he could reach me, the attic ladder suddenly yanked downward. Not by him, not by me, by Mark. He had thrown his entire weight onto it, ripping the ladder away and sending the man crashing to the hallway floor with a heavy, sickening thud. For a moment, the house fell silent. Then the man groaned, rolling onto his side. Karen rushed toward him, desperate. Not to help, but to stop him from getting up. "You weren't supposed to touch him yet," she hissed. Yet, that single word sliced through the confusion. They knew each other. They were working together. But they weren't aligned. Not truly. Something between them had cracked. Mark grabbed my arm as I dropped down from the attic, breath shaking. "Whatever's going on," he said urgently. "It's bigger than her. Bigger than all of this." I pulled the flash drive out just enough to see it. A plain silver stick. Unmarked. Cold. "What's on it?" I whispered. Karen's eyes snapped up to mine, wide and terrified. More terrified than I'd ever seen her. "Everything," she breathed. The injured man forced himself to stand, fury burning in his eyes. "Hand it over," he growled. "That drive doesn't belong to you." My chest tightened. My hands shook, because suddenly I realized something. This wasn't about a garage, or trespassing, or HOA rules. This was about a secret someone was willing to break into my home for, hide in my car for, trap me for, and that secret was now in my pocket. The man stepped forward. "Give to me." I backed toward the door, the tension thick enough to choke on. "No," I said quietly. His face twisted. "Then you won't make it out of this house." But before he could take another step, another phone buzzed. "Mine." One final message. "Run. Now." I didn't think. I ran. Straight into the storm waiting outside. I didn't remember walking up the steps. I didn't remember unlocking the door. All I knew was that my heartbeat was so loud I could barely hear the quiet click as the latch slid open. My garage, my sanctuary, my personal boundary line, felt heavier with every breath I took. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered, casting long, trembling shadows across the floor. Karen's voice stopped me cold. She wasn't yelling this time. She wasn't mocking, demanding, or insulting. She was crying. Real, quiet, broken crying. I hesitated at the doorway. Part of me wanted to walk away, pretend I hadn't heard a thing, let the authorities handle her trespassing and the HOA fallout. Another part of me, the part that had spent 5 long days feeling hunted, manipulated, and pushed to the edge, wanted answers. No more secrets. No more nonsense. I stepped inside. She jolted upright from the little chair she dragged into the garage during her temporary occupation. Her eyes were red, her hair a mess, and her hands, they were shaking. "Finally," she whispered, voice cracking. "You came back." I kept my distance. 5 days, Karen. 5 days locked in a garage that wasn't yours. How did you think this was going to end? She laughed a thin, desperate laugh. Honestly, I didn't think you'd actually leave. Nobody ever leaves. What does that even mean? She looked around the garage like she was seeing ghosts. You don't understand. They needed someone to blame. Someone quiet. Someone who wouldn't fight back. Someone who wasn't connected. The puzzle pieces clicked slowly, painfully. The HOA? I asked. She nodded, collapsing back into the chair. They were going to force you into a violation scam, fake infractions, fines, liens. They've done it to 3 other homeowners. I knew it was coming. They made me part of it. My chest tightened. So your plan was to break into my property? That was your brilliant way of helping. Her voice cracked. They told me to do it. The flickering bulb buzzed above us. I took a step closer, instincts torn between anger and the sickening feeling that someone else had been pulling every string. Karen, why didn't you just warn me? She hugged her arms around herself. Because they told me what would happen if I didn't cooperate. I thought if you came back and found me inside, everything would fall apart faster. I thought you'd expose them before they could pin anything on you. She swallowed hard. Then you locked the door and vanished. I breathed sharply through my nose, trying to process everything at once. The sabotage, the buried clues, the panic she had unknowingly caused. So the cameras, the reports, the threats, the fake violations, all of that was them. And they're furious now, she whispered. You disappearing messed up their timeline. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't the climax I expected. It wasn't clean, or heroic, or satisfying. It was messy, human, complicated. But the final move was still mine. I have proof, I said quietly. Audio recordings, dates, photos. The sheriff is already on alert. Her head snapped up. You do. That's why I left, I explained. Not to punish you. I had to gather everything before they realized I was onto them. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes. Relief. And behind it, guilt heavy enough to drown a person. Before I could say anything else, headlights swept across the garage door. Tires crunched on gravel. Voices approached. Angry, hurried, muffled. Karen's breath caught. It's them. I raised a hand. Stay behind me. The shadows of 3 HOA board members stretched across the frosted window. Their silhouettes looked bigger than they were, like monsters made of paperwork and petty power. I opened the side door slowly, deliberately. Gentlemen, I said calmly. Perfect timing. Their smug expressions faltered when 2 sheriff's deputies, who had been waiting in the neighbor's driveway for my signal, stepped out of the darkness beside me. The board froze. One deputy lifted a folder. Funny thing about running a fake violation racket. People talk, records slip, and when a homeowner provides evidence. He shook the folder lightly. Well, things get real simple. The board members visibly paled. And for the first time ever, Karen stepped forward. Not as a tyrant, not as a bully, but as someone finally facing the truth. I have statements, she said. I'll testify. Everything that had been building, the fear, the pressure, the confusion, broke like a fever. It was over. Or at least that's what I thought. Because as the deputies led the board members away and Karen leaned against the wall, shaking with exhausted relief, I noticed something small, something odd, something out of place on a shelf behind the spare paint cans. hidden camera, one I hadn't installed. And the little red light? It was still blinking. For a moment, I just stared at the blinking red light. It felt impossible. Like after everything I just survived, after exposing the HOA scam, after Karen finally broke and told the truth, there was still one more shadow I hadn't seen. When I reached for the little device, my hand shook. Not from fear, from exhaustion, from 5 days of silence, followed by an avalanche of confrontation that hadn't stopped crashing yet. Karen's voice drifted over my shoulder, small and trembling. That wasn't me. I didn't need her to say it. I knew. There was a different kind of precision in the placement, a quietness that didn't match Karen's chaotic, emotional spiral. This camera had been tucked away months ago, maybe longer, patient, unnoticed. Watching, recording, waiting. The sheriff's deputy stepped in as I brought it out into the light. He frowned. "Where'd you find that?" "Back of the shelf," I said. "Behind old paint cans. It doesn't belong to me." He took it carefully, his brow tightening. "We've seen similar setups in other HOA cases. Someone was building leverage or insurance." Karen sagged against the wall. "They recorded everything. Even me." It hit her harder than it hit me. For all her bad choices, she had been as much a pawn as a bully. Yelled at, pressured, threatened, used. Somewhere along the way, she'd traded her dignity for fear, and I had let anger blind me to that. The deputy assured us they would analyze the footage, trace its installation, and add it to the investigation. It was evidence now, evidence of just how far the HOA board had gone. When they finally drove off with the board members in custody and the camera bagged as evidence, the house fell into a heavy, echoing quiet. I stood in the garage, leaning on the old workbench, letting the last few hours settle into place. The dust, the silence, the single bulb flickering overhead. It felt like I was standing inside the echo of a storm after it had passed. Karen lingered by the door, uncertain. "I guess you hate me," she whispered. I didn't answer at first. I didn't know how. Hate was easy. Hate was loud. But what I felt was something quieter and heavier. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I hate what they turned you into, and I hate what fear does to people." She wiped her face. "I'm sorry." Not the fake kind. The real kind. Maybe it wasn't enough to repair everything, but it was enough to start releasing the weight sitting on my chest. "You'll have to make things right," I said gently. "Not for me, for yourself." She nodded like it hurt. "I will." And for the first time since I'd known her, I actually believed her. When she left, closing the door softly behind her, the garage felt bigger, lighter, mine again. The hidden camera had been the last tether to the nightmare. One final reminder that even when you think you control your life, someone might be pulling strings in the shadows. But it had also given me something unexpected: closure. Not perfect closure. Not movie-style victory. But the kind that comes from standing your ground, choosing courage over fear, and refusing to be defined by what others try to take from you. Over the next few weeks, the sheriff's department dismantled the HOA's operation piece by piece. Neighbors came forward with stories, complaints, proof of pressured signatures and hidden fines. The community changed, slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. And Karen? She testified. Every detail, every instruction, every threat they made. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She confronted everything she'd been part of, tier by tier. Some people forgave her. Some didn't. But forgiveness isn't automatic. It's earned. One evening, after work, I walked into the garage again. The bulb had finally burned out, leaving only soft sunset light coming through the small window. The air didn't feel heavy anymore. Felt like a room I could breathe in again. A reminder that boundaries matter, that home matters, that peace is worth fighting for. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the manipulation, the fear, the long silent hours of those 5 days. And somehow I felt grateful, not for the conflict, but for the clarity it brought. Sometimes you learn who you are only when someone tries to take your voice away. I locked the garage door for the night, feeling the quiet finally settle into something warm instead of threatening. And I whispered the line that had carried me through all of it. When they cross your line, don't disappear. Stand up. If you're watching this right now, let this be your reminder. Protect your boundaries. Speak up for yourself. And never let fear decide who you become. Because even in the darkest moments, you are not powerless. You're the one who gets to turn the lock,